Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to have Chris White from Ford and Vinod Kumar from Vodafone Business here with me today. My name's Tom Seal. I cover tech, media, and telecoms in London for Bloomberg. And today it's quite a particularly good pairing, I think, because Ford and Vodafone are collaborating on using 5G in a vehicle battery plant in Essex, which I believe is the first of its kind in the UK. So perhaps a good place to kick off on things we can learn from this is maybe if both of you can tell us a bit about the work you're doing together, using 5G in manufacturing for an electric vehicle battery workshop. So maybe Chris, if you'd be kind enough to kick off and explain specifically, what it's letting you do and how you're using it.
Okay, so it's in a facility we call ePrime, which is where we're trying out the new technology we're going to need to make electric vehicles, specifically the motors and the batteries that we're going to use, or that we're going to make in really large volumes. Obviously, you can already see we're doing that, and majority of the parts for those vehicles are coming from our North American facilities at the moment. But over the course of the next few years, we're going to be rapidly expanding within Europe to do the same thing. And that gives us a real opportunity to plan what we call factories of the future, right? Only kind of the future is now. It's a one-time opportunity. We've gone from having engine plants and transmission plants, and they're going to start to decline as people migrate from those types of vehicles to needing to build the parts for electrification. And of course that means we've got this almost one-off footprint opportunity to change all of our plants over. And as we do that, well, we need to think about what technologies we need. And one of those key technologies is wireless connectivity. It's typically a very hardwired type of environment at the moment, which is, we'll talk about it, I guess, as we go through this, really constrictive in how you make things. And so we want to change that. And 5G is probably a forerunner in terms of the type of technology that we could use. So we've worked with Vodafone. This is a collaboration project with Vodafone and a number of other partners to introduce one of those networks, a mobile private network, into this trial pilot facility we've got here in Essex. And we're trying out the technology. We're about a year in and we've got another year to go.
Could you quickly give a couple of little examples of what it's letting you do? Is this kind of letting robots talk to each other? What exactly is it doing?
One thing's for sure, we don't necessarily understand this technology very well. It's new to us. It'll be new to all the factories all over Europe that we use this technology in. That is the technology for making electric motors. And as a specific example, we're going to use a lot of laser welding. And we're going to use that very specifically. So it's actually something that not many people have done. And there are a few experts throughout the world who can help us with that. But actually, we need them on the shop floor and we need to connect them. So we want to use 5G to make them telepresent on the shop floor. So that could be through being able to get all the data from the machines. They're a very data-rich machine. There's a lot of data coming out of the machines. So it could be about transferring that data to the cloud where they can see and interrogate it and help us with what's going on the shop floor. Or it could be via augmented reality, wearing the people on the shop floor wearing headsets and getting help directly from those people who may be elsewhere, whether that's one of our consortium partners called the Welding Institute based in Cambridge, a place stacked full of, the world's best welding experts, but they're, an hour and a half away in a car. And that's to us here in Essex. But when we start building parts all over Europe, then having them available will be a massive asset to us. So this is a great opportunity to use that technology.
Fantastic, thank you. And if I can bring Vinod in here, I mean, we're just over a year into this specific partnership, and Vodafone has been striking various other partnerships as well with energy companies as well. What are you learning about 5G's usefulness for manufacturing and enterprise? What did you know? What do you know now that you didn't know a year ago when you started striking these deals?
Firstly, I want to acknowledge Ford and Chris and his team for the great collaboration in the factory that he referred to in Dunton in Essex. It's a great example of having the power of 5G really tested in a real environment. And some of the things that we're learning is one, that it is a journey, right? And that as you're going through it, both Ford and us are learning about the power of the technology and some of the practical challenges we have to deal with when we take the technology, which we know can deliver superior latency and incredible throughput. And then by putting it in the live environment, integrating it into workflows, into systems, is an experience that we will all benefit from. And specifically what we're doing with Ford, we're working with many other manufacturing companies as well in plants of different types, and the learning in each of these situations just feed into each other. A really important thing we knew going in, but the ecosystem, it's not just about Ford and us working together. It's working with the Welding Institute, like you mentioned. It's working with the equipment manufacturers. It is working with a whole range of new devices, dongles, sensors, gateways, and the number of choices, which are 5G-enabled sensors, maybe 2 years ago wasn't that much, and is steadily increasing, and it will continue to grow. So and how you integrate all these different sensors and dongles and devices into workflows and to make sure that they all work within a factory environment is a big learning. How pulling the ecosystem together, I'd say, is probably our biggest learning. And then we're also finding that, yes, it is about the flexibility of 5G allowing robots, multi-purpose machines, AGVs, cobots, all working without wires. But equally, within this environment, every customer has the need for a customized product. But how do you then work with a reconfigurable set of solutions so it reduces the cost of ownership and the speed of deployment for each customer? So there's also a whole commercial angle that we're discovering, and how we design our products and our library of solutions, I'd say, is the other end of the technology. So you have 5G in the middle, you have ecosystem of partners on one side, and on the other end is how do you make it commercially viable so it can be deployed at scale. So those are some of the lessons I'd like to call out.
Absolutely. I mean, it really seems like 5G is a team sport. You need lots of different companies playing roles for cloud computing, data centers, AI, systems integration. And so, we're seeing lots of those partnerships. And you actually hit on my next question there, Vinod, at the end there. I'm quite interested in what kind of benefits 5G might actually, yield on the bottom line, really, when it comes to costs, efficiency, or even, other wraparound benefits, things like security. If either of you would like to chime in on that point.
Yeah, I can maybe start, and Chris can add a lot to it, I'm sure. But firstly, I'd say that we're in the early stages of the journey. But even at this point, and I speak to global CIOs and heads of manufacturing and so on almost every week and get their feedback on the technology. And the interest and the understanding of the power of the technology is there. Now it is about implementing it, and we are involved in use case deployment in limited environments or proof of concepts. There was a Capgemini research that was recently done that only 30% of the organizations are actually making use of the technology. However, of those who are using the technology, 60% are confirming that they're realizing benefits, right? That's one thing to keep in mind. The other important commercial angle to this is today it is still a little bit in a DIY mode, right? Or in a customized mode. And it's quite natural at the early stages of the technology. And quite often, especially for mid to smaller size businesses, they have very clear idea of one big use case, right? However, that may not be enough justification for them to roll it out in a factory or a warehouse or in a hospital. So all of them are asking us for, do you have a library of other ready-made solutions that we can add to the use case we've already identified in order to get the business case, with a reasonable payback and return on investment so that we can deploy it. And so a lot of what we're doing at Vodafone is, as we build these use cases, is trying to see how we can, obviously, what is customized for a business has to remain, that IP has to remain with them. But there are other elements that can be transferred across industries, across customers, in order to reduce the barrier to entry. So I'd say this is a really important aspect. Focusing on the technology is important. The power of the technology, there's no question. We've demonstrated that it's let me just lightly say it's magic, right? It can bring many dreams that we've all thought about to life. But the commercial viability is also something that has to be worked on.
And Chris, how about you? What are you seeing in terms of things you couldn't do before, or processes that could? And I know it's early days, but processes that could be faster.
I mean, I guess I came to this with a fairly basic requirement, which is, as I mentioned, our facilities have always required this hardwiring of every machine that we got to this network so that we can understand in great detail what's going on. And the reason we do that is because we have to have that understanding of what's a very complex picture of what's happening in our factory, no more so than when we launch that facility. Everybody's business pages are full of car companies that have messed up launches. That seems to be something that people people measure fastidiously, and we recognise that it is a really important time, and we need to understand exactly what's going on. And unfortunately, often when you peel back what's going on inside those launches, it's that lack of clear data coming from the shop floor, because that network takes a long time to put in place and to build, and often we're not alone. Car companies are building facilities without those eyes, without being able to understand what's going on. So having immediately available data the minute you wheel the machine into the factory, because it's got great wireless connectivity, would be amazing for us, right? That would be perfect. So that was the going in point before I even got to, this has great latency, or it has the ability to capture even more data than we would normally want. And so it's very much like Vinod just said, it's about building up that expectation of all these other things you can get, because obviously, if I said it was to just take away today's wired network or even a Wi-Fi network, if we got it to work as well as this, and it can't, that's not going to cut it in terms of the investment that's needed for the network. You need to have all these other business cases built up. So I think that's those are the things that was like sort of first base, but now we're seeing some great opportunities with capturing large amounts of data. So the amount of data we can get out of the welding process and the number of welds that go into an electric vehicle is phenomenal, and every single one of them is an electrical connection, and every single one of them is an opportunity for your car not to work. So it's absolutely vital we capture that data and hold it so that we understand and build up a great picture of reliable vehicles. So this technology enables that. And it's high definition vision data, so it's pictures many times over per vehicle, and we've got to capture all that data. And in some cases, we want to take that away and manipulate it with artificial intelligence. So that's using powerful computing somewhere else. So that gets into edge and all those sorts of things. So it really kind of mushrooms. And I think the mistake people are making is, what's the business case for 5G? Well, there probably isn't a business case for 5G. There's a business case for all the things you want to do with it. It's a fantastic enabler for those things.
Yeah, and Tom, if I can just give an example.
Oh, yeah.
Tom, if I can give an example from, say, healthcare, right, which is just moving from manufacturing. We're finding a lot of interest in the healthcare space. Obviously, it's very topical these days, given the strain that the healthcare systems have been through. So everything from having connected hospitals that track patients throughout as they're leaving an operating room where they've had surgery, and through a big hospital to their to the room where they're going to rest and recover, tracking their vitals and making sure that they're getting the support they need if there's any emergency, is an application that's being trialed right now in Germany. We have, in a hospital, I didn't realize it, but the millions or tens of millions of euros or pounds or any other currency of equipment that gets misplaced. Just tracking that alone, one of the hospital administrators said will justify that. But in a hospital environment, to wire everything is going to be really difficult. So 5G plays, when you build a mobile private network covering a hospital, is a great use case. Remote surgery, we talk about it, it's no longer a figment of imagination or science fiction. It is something that we have actually tested in multiple countries and shown that it works. But even before you get there, because there's obviously regulations that have to be worked through, patient consent that is required, but assisted surgery where you have remote specialists guiding a surgeon, sitting in another country or in another city through a complex surgery is something that is happening today using 5G networks. So, there are some very powerful use cases and when to start the journey, but very quickly then, there'll be other things that can be added on given the latency, the speed of connectivity, as well as the security possibilities that 5G offers.
Well, if I can bring up perhaps the rather big and blunt question that many people have about 5G, and perhaps this is for Vinod firstly, Vodafone and its big rivals, you're all investing billions into 5G, the airwaves, the equipment, developing the applications that are going to run on top. So when are investors, going to be able to have some confidence about these business models? I think, Chris just said it's not a business model in and of itself, but it kind of lets various others mushroom out of what it enables. I mean, what would you say to that point when you see investor skepticism, for example?
Well, if 5G was just being rolled out on its own without demonstration of the use cases like we're doing, as an investor, I would be concerned. So I think that real test is, what solutions are you building on top of 5G? Are you enabling your 5G network infrastructure accessible easily to systems integrators, to application developers, to enterprises, so they can enable the 5G benefits into workflows, into other solutions? That, for me, that's what, maybe I'm biased because we're doing it, but I think that's the test, because just consumers are not going to pay more for 5G just because you have 5G, right? Your experience of downloading a Netflix film will be much better, but are you going to pay more for it? Some may not. Gamers may be willing to pay for it. But business customers definitely are beginning to see that 5G combined with technologies like Edge bring alive the power of AI, bring alive the power of AR, VR, mixed reality. And they're willing to pay for that. But we need to show the business outcomes. As Chris said, it's not 5G for the sake of 5G. Okay, fantastic. It offers mobility. But what can you do with that mobility on a shop floor, right? That's what we need to really focus on, and investors should be testing us for that.
Right. Okay. And you announced the 5G factory, if I can call it that, in June. It's been an unusual year. What has been the effect, if any, of the pandemic on the project and your work?
Yeah, of course. So I think actually, not so much. I think there are a few people who are quite sceptical that we would get done what we've done, but we delivered the network pretty much on time. Some small delays, obviously. We needed people to come to the UK to install it. So we lost a little bit of time there, but actually, surprisingly, a lot of the commissioning can be done remotely. So many times things were going on without anybody even being there, which was great. The Ford team have been fantastic. We pretty much kept working on site almost throughout. We had some other things we've been doing. We did around the pandemic. But they took priority. So we built 12,000 ventilators for the NHS. We installed 2 surgical mask manufacturing machines actually in the building where we have this 5G network now. Those kind of things kind of took a bit of a priority, but But once we were kind of back on track with our normal business, the system itself has pretty much run to plan. So we're where we want to be. This next year is now about testing out the facility with all the equipment we've got there. But remote working is really important. You know, I suppose the key thing about the pandemic is it's taught us all an awful lot about, you know, not just doing what we're doing now, talking like this, but you know, how do I run a factory? How do I get support when I need it, where I need it? And the ventilator challenge that we did was a great example of that. We built all those ventilators with a very small company who made, you know, a fraction of that number of ventilators normally, and yet we really, really needed their expertise. So there were times on the production line where we needed support with the ventilators. You imagine they get tested significantly before they end up out in hospitals, and during that test process, there are all sorts of questions that crop up and all sorts of help and support that were needed. So we used headsets, HoloLens headsets, to get that help. And we quickly learned, you know, the limitations of Wi-Fi. You know, it's a little bit patchy. One or two headsets was fine, but a factory full of them would have been a disaster. So, you know, in those sorts of scenarios, 5G will be so much better. You know, that opportunity to have that seamless connection with somebody else across, you know, what is really vital work. You know, that will be really stunning.
It sounds like you were able to repurpose the facility very quickly as well.
Yeah. So we did as the masks were done in that building. We had a separate facility which equally we repurposed in less than sort of, you know, a month really, and we were up and running. And you know, it was a fantastic achievement by the whole consortium.
Amazing. Vinod, you know, looking forward 5 years or so, when 5G projects may have sort of been a bit more matured, when it's widespread, when maybe it's even, you know, paying for itself in some sense. You know, how do you feel the role of the telco will have changed from how people understand it today? Today, people maybe see it as, you know, a pipe for connectivity. Will it be a different kind of actor in a few years' time when there's many of these enterprise networks?
Yeah, definitely. You know, being a pipe for connectivity is vital to all the digital things that happen on top of that. So we should never underestimate the value of the pipe. However, with 5G and mobile private networks, like I said, we need to think about it not just on a standalone basis, but of what goes around it and on that connectivity fabric. So we're very much focused on how do you make the connectivity layer integrated into the edge computing, for example. How do you make the data that is extracted available to customers in a way that it is user-friendly and can be used either by the customer or their partners, or in the cases they choose to expose the data to third parties. So we're thinking way more holistically about it. So what does this mean is I believe that we won't just be offering 5G connectivity, we'll be offering mobile private networks that are public and private, which means you need the knowledge of an operator, because there'll be certain applications which are purely private, right? But 50% of the applications of mobile private networks are for hybrid applications. So the customer will want to use it both in the private environment and also have it traverse and work as effectively on the public network. Right? And in those cases, it's only a telco, an operator who has that expertise that can offer that seamlessness. So that's one thing. The second is we'll morph from being just a connectivity provider to being a platform provider, so that applications can be built on top of the underlying connectivity. And selectively at Vodafone, our plan is to move into certain vertical applications and certain horizontal applications. I'll give you an example. Worker safety or remote worker solutions can work in a mine, they can work in a port, they can work in a manufacturing facility, they can work in a warehouse, right? There's no need for our customers to go and build that solution stack themselves. We will have components like that available in our library of solutions to use. So we see this as an opportunity to go beyond just being a pipe provider.
And this is why Vodafone is, her planning to hire software engineers, because I think we'd all accept that 4G has delivered enormous benefits, but perhaps the economic benefit of those innovations, things like Uber or streaming YouTube on the train, have not necessarily accrued to the telcos. So this is an opportunity for the telcos to get in on the ground floor and help develop those applications.
But that's one of the reasons why we're hiring thousands of software developers. In addition to that, it's also about becoming more self-sufficient when it comes to creating services in order to create unique IP, but also to make sure that we do it at the right cost and we can get things out very quickly rather than purely depending on third parties to do that. Second is networks are moving to being more software driven. So you look at the move towards software SD-WAN and SD-LAN and so on. So that's important that we are knowledgeable on how to configure and develop software ourselves than depend on third parties. So many reasons, including moving up the stack to offer solutions such as the ones we just described.
Fantastic. One question that was submitted by our audience, and also Chris very briefly alluded to earlier, was the role that AI could play on top of 5G in private networks, and how that could add a lot of value. So I don't know if, Chris, you could speak about that specific example you were talking about, and maybe Vinod, you've come across others as well.
Yeah, so that if we take all these images of welds, or we have machines that are starting to, we're measuring how they're behaving, thousands of, lots of sensors over the whole factory, actually kind of asking people to understand that data and interpret that data in the volumes we're talking about will become, really impractical. So it's really important, actually, that we have AI looking at data and being able to highlight anomalies for us to react to. And at the moment, a lot of that computing is done at the shop floor in computers that are on every machine. It's unmanageable, and it's also low quality computing. They're not fantastic machines. So being able to get that to a place quickly using 5G, where we can put a real high quality level of computing around it with a really clever amount of management around it as well. I think that's really important to us. So that's really exciting for us. So we're starting work. One of the partners, Lancaster University, is taking some of the data that we put in the cloud and is applying artificial intelligence to that to see what the possibilities are.
No, if I can just build on that, Tom, the sheer volume of data that will come out of the 5G applications, it's going to be humanly impossible to process them and to effectively use that volume of data. And that's where AI comes in, and it'll have many different applications. And quite often it's feeding the human enough information so that the human can make the final decision. I'll give you an example from surgery, right? So we're working with a company in Spain now that has technology for both remote surgery, but also for training doctors while they're doing operations. And the 5G network is capturing huge volumes of data. It's sending to high performance computing, and then comparing it with tens of thousands of other similar operations that have been done, doing pattern recognition, and then giving the best choice to the doctor on where to make the next incision, right? That can only be done with the power of AI coupled with the speed of 5G networks. And obviously lots of other visual recognition technology and so on. So it is AI, I think, assisting humans, as well as certain applications. The machine will do the pattern recognition and make choices on its own.